Hi there, my name is Luis Báez. My pronouns are he, him, and the best advice that I've ever received is that excuses are the tools of idiots.
Ooh, excuses are the tools of idiots.
Yes,
That's some powerful stuff, buddy. Where did you who told you that? How does that serve you?
that was actually an arch nemesis of mine in college said that once, and it stuck with me. Number one, because it stung, because this is my arch nemesis, but also because there was like a real message there about self accountability, right? Like excuses are tools of idiots. I'm too smart to be using these tools. And so I use that to just kind of remind myself, like, I'm in control, or to ask myself, like, what can I control in this situation?
Ooh, I really like that. I would agree with that. I no excuses, just make it happen, right?
Yeah.
Just move forward and get there. So, well, you've done that, man. You've got quite the prolific career. As I'm prepping for this, I'm like, holy crap, dude, this guy's talking to me. You've done some really good stuff. So let's take us back, Luis. You said, at university, so at college, right? So where did you go to school? What did you do in school?
Yeah, I went to Wheaton College in Southern Massachusetts. It's a liberal arts school, so very tiny, no more than 10 people in the class, like real intellectual rigor, but also everyone in your business socially. So it was conditioning for the real world. And after college, I moved back to New York City where I grew up. And that's where my career took off.
Cool. New York City. That's quite a place, man. Quite a place. So I'm curious, do you think that had you not went back to New York City that life, the full expression of the wonder that you are would have not have come through? I mean, because I'm from a little town, man, and people are not as open-minded as they are in New York City.
Yeah, I think I have to kind of think of the entire lived experience that I've had. I was born in Puerto Rico, raised in the Bronx, not too far from Yankee Stadium. And I mentioned I went to school in Southern Massachusetts. So, very different environments, very different in situations that I've had to come up against. And it's helped me to be very adaptable in different situations. But also, more than anything, the thing that I'm most grateful for is the cultural intelligence that I've gained from being in these spaces, interacting with people that are different than me, and like the awareness that I have of my capacity to connect with people across the table because of that.
I love that. Cultural intelligence.
Yeah,
That's a good way to put that, right? I think,
yeah,
as we talk about diversity, equity, and belonging, I think cultural intelligence is a great way to kind of frame that up
yeah.
because often, we don't think of it in those terms. That's the first time that I've heard that term. So is that your word or where did you hear that, Luis?
I can't recall where I might have heard it, but the thing that's really important to note is, when we think about leadership and we think about, how it is that we assess someone's capacity to lead, we often start, leaning into EQ and IQ, right? That intelligence intellectually, that intelligence emotionally, and being able to connect with people and read a room and read a situation. But then there's a layer of cultural intelligence, and that's your capacity to connect with people that are vastly different than you, grew up differently than you, think differently than you, and still have the ability to get everyone moving in the same direction towards the same goal. Right. And when I think about what is my competitive edge, or when I think about examples of leadership that I admire or don't, right, the people that I admire most were the people who were able to connect across the table, make me feel seen, heard, and understood, even though we grew up in very different corners of the earth.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, that's what we all want, right? We all want to be seen and heard and understood and
Yeah.
accepted and loved for who we are, right? That's all. That's ultimately that's it, right?
Yes, yes, and we want to have our contributions celebrated from our perspectives as well, right? It's understanding that when we introduce a new idea or a new concept that borrows from our lived experiences, or is a reflection of the communities that we come from, just making sure that that's respected and considered.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. Love that. Love that. Well, one of the big things that you talk about and that you're a bit of an expert in here is this idea of intrapreneurship as opposed to
Yes.
entrepreneurship, right? And what we
Yes.
do inside our organizations as that. And I can say that's something that I always strive to be as well. And so, how do you define that, though, Luis? How do you define entrepreneurship?
Yeah, an entrepreneur is someone who takes accountability about their stake in the business that they work in. And they drive their contribution as if they were an owner of the business, right? And so when I think about my own training and conditioning experience coming up in sales, I've had books of business or territories that I've covered or industries that I've served, right? And on behalf of the company, but it was all under my purview, and I had to leverage the resources available to me across legal, marketing, etc., to move deals across the table. And I didn't quite understand my capacity or the breadth of like what's required to be an entrepreneur until I stepped out of corporate and started my own consultancy and became an entrepreneur. And that's when I realized like how all the tentacles, kind of work together to bring things together, right? And that shifted my perception of who I am in this space and how it is that I show up and contribute. Yeah.
Right on. Right on. I love that, man. I love that. So you said though that you had to step out
Yeah.
in order to step in. So
Yeah.
talk to me about that, because I think internally a lot of folks to that point, they don't understand that. They don't recognize all that is required. So
Yeah.
talk to me about some of your time inside, I guess first.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I think, in a lot of organizations, they want people just to fit in, right? You got to fit in this little box, and here's where you belong, and you need to stay here. Is that, am I reading that right, or am I wrong?
Yeah, it's about making sure that you conform to what's expected of you in terms of performance and presentation. Look, I work in sales and I got my start in advertising sales, which is in New York City, a very relationship driven sort of industry. So you got to get in where you fit in. You got to stay in and fit in, right? You've got to be a people pleaser, crowd pleaser. You have to adapt and assimilate in many ways, right? And to contextualize where I'm coming from, I am someone who is an out gay man. I am Puerto Rican. I'm urban. I'm first generation. So I'm the first in my family to step into these spaces. I don't have an uncle or a cousin or someone that I can turn to who's done this first, who could have given me any advice about how to navigate corporate cultures, right? And I just stepped in and threw myself into all of that, right? And so that's the context for the way that I step into these spaces. And yeah, early in my career, as I had to pay my dues to the process before I got my executive title. I was a good boy. I was a good employee. I was that good diversity hire. I was whatever you wanted me to be because I was so hungry and so eager to have a seat at the table. Because here's also what I bring to my perspective. Most people think about like sales as a job, right? And when we think about that shift from like being an employee to an entrepreneur, it's a higher level of awareness of your contribution and the function of that business. But I mean, up until that point, like you're just trying to move up. You're trying to get your titles, you're trying to get your money, your respect, because sales is a path that is life changing, right? When you think about that capacity to make money, unlimited income, unlimited potential that gets you out of student debt, credit card debt, helps you take care of family, plan that vacation, right? All these things that you aspire to and all these ambitions that we have, this path is the best sort of access that I can think of in the corporate setting to get there and be in control of your destiny financially. And so when I think about when I step into these spaces, I wasn't always allowed to have my start at the starting line. I had to claw my way to the starting line and then claw my way beyond that because of the way that I present, the way that I show up, the way that I bring all of my experiences and my identities to the workplace unapologetically.
Wow. So that's interesting, right? I mean, did you recognize that you were kind of starting from behind? Is that something that you understood and that you, I guess, accepted as maybe too strong of a word because you fought it? But I mean, how did that kind of show up for you, man? Because the sales bro culture is pretty darn strong.
Yes, it is. There were a couple of ways that this manifested. I mean, when I think about my customer interactions, I've had interactions with customers that have requested to speak to my manager or requested to work with another rep because they weren't comfortable working with someone who's an out gay man, right? That was direct feedback from customers. I've also had senior leadership, we're talking VP of sales at a global organization, reputable organization, stepping into a sales huddle dropping the F bomb, addressing me, right? And calling out my lack of, because I'm not fitting in, or I'm not contributing to the expectation or the standard, or I need to hush up about who I am and just do my job. Right. That was the kind of feedback that I got early in my career before getting my executive title, because there does come a point in sales where once you have developed your Rolodex, your capacity, your credentials, and all the respect on your name, you move through companies and with a lot more control over, this sort of environment you can work in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I that is really tough, man.
Yeah.
I applaud you for fighting through that and not getting beaten down, because that is really tough.
Yeah.
That is really tough and really unacceptable from, that that's
Yeah.
that's tough.
That's why we're out here doing this work, right? I'm now in a position where, gosh, I'm not concerned about retaliation. I'm not concerned about speaking up on my own behalf or on someone else's behalf as needed, right? To make sure that people are safe and included, right? And making sure that people are productive and that they have that opportunity to make that life-changing money on the sales floor, right? So now I'm in a position of saying, not on my watch. We're going to send you off for some more training, send you off for some more certification, or completely chop you from the team, because we're not going to have this kind of behavior. Yeah.
Good. That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. Well, let's talk about how that plays with that entrepreneurship, because I think that's, once you step into your greatness and you own that and you're really confident in that, and I guess you deserve those chops, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier. But talk to me about, in like before that, because some
Mm.
people, they're still struggling, man.
Yeah.
They're still clawing, they're still fighting.
Yeah, they are. And it's, uh, where there are, there's a greater critical mass now, right? Of people like myself stepping into leadership and doing the due diligence and the work to create safer spaces. And the best that I can say to folks is do what you need to do to find the right space for yourself. I'm not someone who subscribes to, crying wolf. I know that the economy is what it is, but that doesn't mean that there isn't opportunity, right? It's just a matter of making sure that you are in the right seat on the right bus for yourself. And some of the advice that I offer people when they think about, when they're assessing whether they're in a safe environment, or as they're considering jobs and wondering if it's the right space for them, I invite people to ask questions like, how do you celebrate people's contributions? Are there employee resource groups, right? Do you have executive sponsors for women, Black people, queer people in your workplace, right? Is there programming? Is there investment in these communities and in really showcasing those contributions from those communities, right? And even thinking about asking questions around, compensation, right? When's the last time you did any sort of gender parity review of the way that you compensate your people, right? And having that answer or not, right? Some people might not give you that answer. That is your answer. If there's a lack of transparency and there's a lack of awareness, or if there's never been consideration for some of these things that you're asking about, red flag, right? Think about that for yourself. You do have options this day and age for safer spaces to work with purpose-driven organizations that sell product that means something to you as well.
Wow. So those are really powerful questions, and
Yeah.
ones that often we can start talking to HR about that, start talking to recruiters about that.
Yeah.
But how do folks not get, to your point, retaliated against or even overlooked in an interview because they are different than the recruiter?
Yeah. I mean, look, if that's the way you're going to be treated in an interview process, do you really want to be there? Do you really want to work there? I think that's incredibly telling, right? That if they can't figure out a way to connect with you and provide for you an equitable and safe interview process, if you're already getting all the mixed signals, and if they're not going to be receptive to your ideas, is that really the right workplace for you? Right? That's more of an internal question. Externally, let's say you succeed through the interview process, you get that job and you step into that environment, you have to be in a position to take control of your career. One of the best things that I've learned, you ask about like what's the best piece of advice I've ever received in life. Another piece of advice that I've gotten in my career is keep receipts, right? I do not count on anyone to showcase or highlight my contributions during any performance reviews or anything like that. So you better believe I'm out here with my little tracker, quantifying, measuring, bullet pointing all of my contributions, all of the revenue impact and everything. So that if there's any question about misalignment around my performance or my approach, here are my numbers. We work in sales, period, right? This is a numbers driven business. Here are my numbers. All right, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do and then some. So let's revisit what the real issue here is. Maybe you don't have the cultural intelligence to deal with someone like me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's great advice really for everybody, right? I mean, keeping receipts and being able to have that background is certainly important regardless of what's happening there. I think that's really good advice. So let's talk some more about entrepreneurship here, Luis,
Yeah.
because I think that is super valuable for
Yeah.
folks. And so how do we, what's the first step that we have to take to kind of lean into that entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, I think you have to like let go of whatever attachment you have to your title or whatever path you are on for whatever promotion, right? And really look at the bigger opportunity here. I work in tech, right? And so I've worked traditionally for companies that compensate people in a number of ways and provide perks and privileges that other industries don't, right? And so when I think about like, stepping into the opportunity, right? Rather than trying to conform to the way that things are done, I've got to be a nonconformist. I've got to let go of the title, be untraditional because I'm already stepping into an untraditional space. Then I have to think about my stake in the business, right? Part of the way that people are compensated in tech is that there's an equity component. Right. That means that you have shares in this business. You have shares in this company. This company belongs to you, right? And you have to really reconfigure and rewire yourself from like, this is just another check mark on a list or another item on my offer letter, but this is actually your stake in the ground. This is the way that you need to think about commanding space and authority, the way that you show up in meetings. I own a part of this business. I'm raising my hand because we have a problem, right? And then there are layers to thinking about, how you prepare and how you show up as an entrepreneur. One of the things we've been talking about, diversity, equity, inclusion. Another thing that's really important is wellness. We talked about how a career in sales can be life changing. But the thing is that the way that we can talk about skills all day long, training, certification, coaching, that's all in my wheelhouse, right? No matter what's provided for you, if you as a human being are not good, if you're not whole, if you are suffering, you're not going to bring the energy that's required to succeed in sales, right? If you're not physically well, mentally well, financially stable, that's going to impact the way that you show up for customers. That's going to impact the type of business that you're building, or even your self concept or your mindset for manifesting and hitting those goals, right? So we do start with, am I taking care of number one? Before I step into this business and try to be the hero, is my cup full? Are my appointments aligned? Did I get my workout buddy? Am I good? Right? Then you have to think about, well, what's required of me? Because being in business, working in startup life, tech life, etc., is really intense and demanding. You have to have an aptitude for managing your time, because you can't get to these appointments, make time for these appointments, or do any of these things if you don't set healthy boundaries, if you don't bucket the things that you do, if you don't say no, or reschedule, right? Well, you need to be carving out time for number one first before you step into the workplace. So, commitment to yourself, commitment to that time management. Then we're talking about the commitment to the business, right? Outside of getting to know your job, get to know the way that the marketing bone connects to the operations bone, connects to the sales bone, connects to the product bone. You have to understand how all these parts of a business all function with one another. And this is why I mentioned, Phil, it didn't click for me. It didn't really click for me until I stepped outside of working for someone else and I worked for myself. And it's like, man, I didn't know how good I had it as an account executive. Y'all did my marketing, you handled my legal, right? You took care of my overhead. Like, all I had to do was show up, smiling down, collect this check, right? a shift in perspective, right? It took a moment of stepping away from it to then step back in and really appreciate how good the opportunity was, right? And once that happened, yes, I translated that fluency, for understanding how the business functioned into the way that I showed up and methodically went at it and building my own businesses within these companies. So those apples all need to fall, right? I got to take care of me. I got to set healthy boundaries. I got to really understand business, not just how to sell, but understand business, like allow myself a proper business education. And then beyond that, thinking about those critical skills like time management, one, project management is another. And even thinking about executive presence, you have to be someone who's a very persuasive communicator in your writing, in person, in the boardroom, right? Those are the places to spend your time and thinking about how do I elevate myself as an entrepreneur and make myself versatile for this company and beyond.
Wow. So any of those we could dive deep on, but I'd like to talk about the executive presence one. You talked about persuasive communication, and
Yeah.
I think, I've never seen a college course in that. I've never seen that. Now I know that they exist now. I mean, my friend Zoe Chance, right? She teaches at Yale, and that's her jam here. But let's say, salespeople often aren't going back to college to get their MBA. They're often self-educated, self-driven, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, what are some good ways to improve that? Have you found courses or books, or what have you found, Luis?
It's called the School of Hard Knocks, yo. I grew up in New York. You know what I mean? Like I had to get mine because no one was coming for me. No one was coming to save me. There was no trust fund. There was no rich uncle. I had to smile and dial, right? So there was a lot of self pressure and anxiety, right? That's one certain component of it. But even just beyond that, right? Like thinking about, your sort of worldview. Like you don't need to take a course in order to develop a skill. You need to be an experiential person, right? I often connect with sales reps who onboard, and we can hit them with, here's a course, here's a checklist, here's whatever. It's like, cool. The way that I learn is just jumping on calls and just learning from other people and repeating what it is that I learn as I go, right? You have to think about like, what is your learning style? And so I am someone that's just thrown himself off the deep end. I make the mistakes and then I double back and I go, okay, let me read the Challenger sale or let me read this, like what was it that I missed out on, right? I'm not someone that ever had like a methodical approach to learning sales. I learned from the best people in the room, from the people that I admired and respected, and they weren't always the people that were top of the leaderboard. Right, there were people who I borrow secret sauce from because it gelled with my style.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
that's really good advice. A lot of times we just look at those at the top of the leaderboard, and everybody's got something that we can learn from, right? We can learn
Yeah.
from all angles and everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I love that it has to jive with your style too.
Yeah.
Not everybody sells the same way, right? That's the
No.
beautiful thing about sales. We're all special, and we
Yeah.
all, we're all kind of amalgamations of all the best and the worst of everybody in the room.
Yeah, I think actually, Phil, the fact that I'm not sharky and aggressive is actually my vantage point, right? Because especially coming from the advertising world, they're used to people like coming in and like really applying that pressure and squeezing money out of you. But I kind of come in and go, that sucks, doesn't it? Like that you're spending way too much time on that, aren't you? Wouldn't you rather do this or that or that or that? Right. And so I'm not someone that leans into like the product knowledge and the technicality of things. I'm really fine tuned with the person that I'm talking to. Right. And so I invite people like show up as yourself. There is, and I'm someone who is an introvert. That's the other thing. I work in sales, but I'm not an extroverted person. So I am all the way outside of that typical norm and mold. And I've had a revenue impact of over 600 million as an individual contributor. So, yes, you can find success on your own terms.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. So all right, Luis, let's wrap this sucker up, man. Give us some advice, the first step that folks need to take if they want to go on this journey of finding themselves, being an entrepreneur, and really taking up space as the awesome person that they are. How do they get started?
Yeah, I think you need to elevate your self-awareness, right? We always have this self-concept of like, this is who we think we are, and this is who we admire or want to be, right? And you need to like really like understand what is the gap between where you are and where you want to get to. Take all the self assessments, receive all the feedback, spend the time listening to your work, reviewing the things that you contribute to, and face all the spinach between your teeth. That's honestly the best way that you're going to get through that.
That is awesome, man. That is fantastic. Well, cool. Well, if folks want to get to know more about Luis, you can go to luisbaez.com. That's LuisBaez.com. And Luis, if there was one other place that you'd want to send people if they can get some more of your magic, some more of your insight, where should they go?
That's a great question. Head on over to luisbaez.com/video ask. One of the things that I have mentioned today is I show up in a very authentic way when I show up in business and in sales. And I'll give you my entire playbook around that if you check out that link.
Wow, that is super helpful, man. So that's luisbaez.com/video ask.
Yep.
You can check that out, sign up for that, see what's going on there. Get started, friends. Get started being more of an entrepreneur. Get started taking up space and get started belonging where you belong. Keep your receipts
Yeah.
and learn from Luis. Luis, thank you, man. This has been awesome. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
I appreciate you, my